It's Chris, Iraq. I don't know if we're live yet. Hold on.
Oh, okay, sorry.
My fault. I didn't know if we were going live. Okay.
Okay, we're up on YouTube. Give me 2 seconds to put us on us.
We're live on YouTube.
Okay, we're on our site. We're good.
All righty. Good evening, everyone. Want to welcome everyone. Sorry, got interrupted there. To this evening's budget presentation, and I'm going to kick it over to Iraq so we can get straight into it. So I want to thank Iraq for all of his hard work. It's his first budget at Borough Hall. So congratulations, and look forward to hearing some good things and where we need to go.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Give me one moment while I get everything ready here. Fantastic. Okay. So hello, everyone. My name is Iraq Shahansky. I'm the new recent budget director here at the Queens Borough President's Office. I'm very, very happy to join you all. You know, as part of our charter mandate responsibilities as Borough Board, we have to submit a response for the preliminary budget of fiscal year 2024. Just a little background on this information for everyone. I know a lot of faces here have done this before, so we're going to follow the same type of structure. We're going to compare the fiscal year 23 adopted budget versus the fiscal year 24 preliminary budget. These numbers are rounded up in the presentation, so there will be minor discrepancies from the document that we sent on Friday and revised document that we sent today. In some agencies, we're going to get a little deeper and compare, you know, the allocations that Queens had versus all the other boroughs. And this will allow us to know how, you know, these budget allocations affect the borough of Queens and the communities that we represent. After that, after each agency's borough overview, what I'm gonna do is start talking about the budget recommendations that were drafted based on what people have presented on the hearing that we put together for on January 30th and 31st. Plus, you know, the input that we got through testimonies, the community board's priorities, and these recommendations are a starting point. I'm here mostly to also hear your input, because I want to make sure that we can include all the voices of the communities that we represent and present a good response that, you know, it's equitable, just for all of the communities. So without much further ado, let me start with this. So first, well, 1 second, it's not moving. There you go. First of all, I just want to mention that the fiscal year 2024 preliminary budget is forecast a spending of $102.7 billion. The tax revenue forecast at this time is of $68.9 billion. The majority of this revenue is coming from property taxes, which is coming at 31.87 billion. Personal income taxes comes next with 14.84 billion, and sales taxes with $9.2 billion. There's other types of income that are detailed in the budget presentation, but I want to highlight two of them, which is one is the federal and state grants. The federal grants are providing us a $9.4 billion of revenue, and the state grants are providing 16.4 of revenue, which is about 500 million more than the previous year. So with that, I'm going to start and go to our first agency, which is the Queens Borough President's Office. As you will see through the presentation, there's going to be numbers in parentheses and highlighted in red. This means that are in the negative numbers. That's for reference, and as well that we're condensing the information in the thousands. So when you see in thousands, that means, for example, I'm going to go with the difference here that says 827. That means it's $827,000, except for the Department of Education that will have a note that is in the millions just because of the amount of the budget that agency has. So let's start. In the fiscal year 23 adopted budget, our personal expenses had a $4.3 million for our agency, and on OTPS had a $1.6 million. That gave us a total of $5.9 million to operate last year. Compared to this preliminary budget, we have a forecast of $5.08 million that is divided in this way. Personal expense will have $4.3 million, and our OTPS has a $775 million. This means that we're unfortunately our agency is getting a little cut here. We have $827,000 decrease from the fiscal year 23. This is a big problem for us, just because within our operating budget we provide funding or expense funding for the organizations of Queens, so they can provide critical services like food insecurity programs or senior services, among others. I know the VP had some opinions about this. So VP, anything you want to mention about this agency?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to continue to work with the administration, but it is my hope to make some progress here because, especially coming through the pandemic where a lot of issues were exacerbated, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's senior services, we are getting a lot of requests and we can't fulfill a lot of those requests on the expense side because we just don't have it. So any cut here is detrimental to ensuring that we can continue to build a Queens that truly works for everyone, especially coming out of this pandemic. So thank you, Iraq, for making that point.
Yeah, and just to put a little more perspective, the difference or how this budget can affect us. In the last 5 years, fiscal years, you can see in this chart and also in the book that I sent, a comparison of the percentages of the amounts allocated for personal services and for other than personal services allocated, where we never had an instance in the last 5 years where our OTPS was below the 27% of a whole allocation. And this year, in the preliminary budget, we're at 15%. This is really puts in perspective how much of a disadvantage this puts us, especially when I go to the next slide, when, this is historically unfortunate and unjust, I would say, that, per capita, Queens continues to be the borough with the less funding per person in the borough, right? Compared to the 9.06 in Staten Island or 3.91 in the Bronx. Again, we need to continue to fight and push for our borough to make sure that we have the right appropriate funding to better serve our community. For that, we have a few recommendations here that are very similar to the previous year because we continue to encounter this situation. We need to increase the agency budget to better serve the borough of Queens and restore and increase the agency budget line on the other than personal service budget line. So this was our first recommendation. Continues to be the same push, and that's what we were going to be fighting for in this upcoming cycle. Up next, we have our community boards, which is all of you. The amazing work that you do, definitely, it's one of the biggest priorities for us. As you can see in this chart, where I'm going to go a little faster, so we don't have to, I don't want to take most of your time on this beautiful day. Our fiscal year 23 adopted budget had a $3.6 million for all the community boards. This is for citywide. And I'm sorry, this is for Queens specifically. I'm sorry. So this is specifically for the community of Queens. We have $3.6 billion, and we have, this represents a $15,000 decrease from your overall budget. The personal service is getting $8,000 less, and your OTPS is allocating $23,000 less than the previous year. This definitely is a a situation, and I just noticed a mistake here in my presentation, so apologies for that. This is a situation that we definitely have to look at, and I know the VP is leading the way for this fight and restore this funding. VP, anything you want to mention here?
Same as last year, we're going to fight any cuts. If anything, we want enhancements to community boards. And I know many of you have come to us and say, you've had the challenges around doing virtual and, and you have a lot of needs. So we are going to be meeting with the mayor, and I know the other borough presidents share my sentiments on this, and we look forward to continuing to have the conversation with the mayor, being that he was a borough president too. So we would hope that he definitely understands the need to keep, your budgets intact and enhance.
Yeah, and with that said, the only modification I have to do here, and I'll make sure to take note, Fanny, if we can take note that the total here is not corrected. Unfortunately, the cuts for our Queens Borough, it's a little bigger than that. We're looking at $31,000 of budget cuts on the preliminary budget. So I'll make sure to note that change in the response, and we'll continue to push to see that further. Again, I want to mention that throughout this presentation, we're going to make reference to the population that resulted from the census of the 2022 census. So unfortunately, the numbers do not reflect the reality our borough is presenting right now. Our borough is the only borough that continues to grow exponentially. And in a few years, we'll most likely be surpassing the borough with the most population as on the previous census, which is Brooklyn. This comes to result from the great push that has been done to accommodate more new residents, but also a lot of the asylum seekers and immigrants who have come in the last years, in the last few months, have made Queens their home, because Queens is the world's borough, and everyone feels like at home when we come here. This takes us to the per capita support that the community boards have in Queens to be the lowest per capita support among the 5 boroughs. Again, is the same situation as the Queens Borough President's Office. As you can tell, we are at $1.50 per person in the borough, compared to 2.09 from the Bronx, and followed by 1.82 in Manhattan. So the recommendations for this year is fully restore and enhance the funding for the Queens community boards, and fund top budget priorities of each community board. These ones, we reflected them on the draft that I sent you. I listed the top 10 priorities that you all had. And we'll continue to talk with the administration to see this through in the different agencies. Next, we have the Department of Education. The preliminary budget forecasts a 30.7 billion budget for the Department of Education, which is a decrease of $295.3 million compared from the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. The fiscal year 23 preliminary budget reflected a decrease of $826.18 million from the fiscal year 22 adopted budget. So this means we have, even though there's it's not as big as a cut, we're not back to the levels of the fiscal years prior to the pandemic, which DOE had better funding. As you can tell here, Queens continues to grow in its population for the reasons I mentioned before. And we have the second highest number of pre-K enrollment, preschool special education enrollment, K-12 free or reduced price lunch, and students with disabilities count. Queens has the highest number of K-12 enrollment and K-12 English language learners, which corresponds, to the big and increasing immigrant population in Queens. I know education is a big issue for the borough president, and he's been trying to fund as much as we can on education. This year, previous fiscal year 23, we allocated an unprecedented capital money allocations of almost $11 million. VP, anything you want to mention on this?
Same jargon that I said on everything else, right? I mean, education, we just can't withstand these cuts during this period when there's a clear need for more funding to go into education across the borough. And I'm getting around to a lot of these schools, in particular high schools right now, where you see the disinvestment and the principals are all trying to hold it together, but they're not asking for less, they're asking for more. So we're going to push hard to make sure we don't see any cuts here. And in lieu of especially foundation aid coming from the state, we need to make sure that none of our schools are taking any cuts, being that the state has invested a historic amount of aid to our public schools. So we'll look forward to working through this, and we're still going to do everything we can to fill the gaps in terms of the capital budget for a lot of these schools as well. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Yeah, and this takes me to the next part, which is the funded seats that by district that our borough has. So far, as you can tell, the total number of in November 2022, the total amount of funded seats were 12,797, and the number of seats completed or in progress is 7,562 seats, right? So right now we have a comparison. We still need to find how to fund 5,236 seats throughout the borough. I know this is an issue that was brought up by, I believe, all the community boards, the need of extra seats, the need for all levels of schooling. So for that, we created the following recommendations, which I know you might have extra asks, and I'll be happy to take those notes at the end of the presentation. The first recommendation for DOE is dedicate capital funds for the construction and expansion of high schools, increase expense funding for Queens schools, increase access to technology for students, and continue city council initiatives. The city council does provide funding to cover shortfalls from the mayoral budget proposals, and often becomes a life-saving funding for these important seats for our children and youth at the borough of Queens. With that, I'm going to pass to the Department of Aging. We have a growing population of seniors in our borough. The mayor's fiscal year 24 preliminary budget is forecasting a $466.67 million budget for this agency. This is a shortfall of $73.88 million compared to the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. The main decrease of funding in this agency is attributed to senior services. This budget item is getting a cut of $65.26 million, followed by case management with a decrease of $5 million. However, there's an increase on senior employment and benefits of $1.6 million. As mentioned, there's some key programs that are getting certain cuts in DIFTA, and as we can see here, social adult day services are having a $1.9 million cut, which basically cuts the whole funding for this budget item, and also home delivery meals contracts, which is a critical and life-saving service, is getting a $21.4 million cut. However, I do want to highlight something that I really commend on this preliminary budget is the geriatric mental health services. That is getting a bump of $2.6 million in the preliminary budget. For that, we came up with the following recommendations, which is restore and enhance funding for senior services, restore and enhance funding for senior services. This is Borough President discretionary funding. Every year when we fight and win this push, we manage to allocate funding for our senior services organizations or CBOs throughout the borough. These are services that are specifically for senior citizens that vary from food insecurity, casework, transportation and other needed programs. We're also asking for the increase for home delivery meals to award organizations that provide culturally humble meals to our seniors. This means that they will provide from kosher to halal to special dietary meals for our seniors. And also we want to push to continue city council initiatives. With that, we move to the Administration for Children's Services, ACS. This is a lot of numbers. So on the left, you'll see the first part of the chart and the continuation on the right side with a total at the end of it. It's just a very big chart and it was not fitting on the presentation. So anything I'm happy to modify and present it in a better way for anyone when I send this presentation for you to have. The mayor's fiscal year 24 preliminary budget is presenting a 2.6 billion budget for ACS. This is a shortfall of $70.95 million compared to the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. Programmatic funding for childcare services and placement are funded significantly less than fiscal year 23. This is concerning again for us, just because of the amount of children that we're, we need to place them in, foster care services or, making sure that these kids are being taken care of. For that, we have recommendations of restoring the funding for adoption services, increasing the number of child protector specialists, restore funding for childcare vouchers, and continue city council initiatives. Up next, we're going to the Department of Youth and Community Development. This department is presenting a $943 million budget, for the preliminary fiscal year 24 preliminary budget, which is a shortfall of $188.2 million from the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. Several programs are funded less than what they were in fiscal year 23, including adult literacy, community development programs, and other youth programs. Programmatic funds for out-of-school time, which includes Compass and Sonic programs, is budgeted at $419.4 million. This is $14.03 million less than fiscal year 23, adopted budget. Programmatic funds for SYEPs, which is summer youth employment, is budgeted at $206.52 million, which is $21.74 million more less than the adopted budget in fiscal year 23. This again, the budget cuts on these programs is concerning to us, because we know when our youth has a lot of time on their hands is when the crime cycle gets involved in their lives, and this results in a wide variety of issues, plus adding the big influx of youth that we're getting from asylum seekers or other immigrants really puts a burden on the organizations that provide these services.
Let me add, we're seeing this explosion in youth violence across the city, and our borough is not immune to it. So we, as we like to say, you better do the preventative work up front. Otherwise, we're creating a vacuum, which only leads to more violence. As they say, the idle time is the devil's playground. So it's better that the city invests up front, because that's what really will impact how our summers are, especially summer youth being such a great program. We saw a lot more kids in it. We need to make sure we're doing more of it, putting some dollars in our young people's pockets, but also giving them the real work-life experience as well. So we're going to fight all of these cuts. We need to see more community centers, more beacon programs open across the city as well. So thank you, Ira.
Yeah, of course. With that, we came up with the same some recommendations here. And again, I'm taking note of a few changes that I need to make to the presentation. The book does not reflect a lot of these typos that I'm experiencing. So the recommendations are increased funding for summer youth employment, fund universal after school. That's without the elementary for this particular, but that will be in the education one. Increase funding to cover more campus NYC sites in Queens. Increase funding for additional staff tasked with execution of discretionary funding contracts. This is a big problem for for CBOs or nonprofits in Queens. The contracts do take a lot to be processed, and that delays the way they provide the services. So we need to make sure that agencies are staffed properly so these setbacks do not happen. We also are pushing to restore funding for adult literacy, and we continue to push for the continuation of city council initiatives. So hopefully we'll see a lot of changes on the executive budget for this, and I'll make sure to keep you all updated on that one. So now we're on Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, as well as known as DOHMH. The fiscal year 24 preliminary budget is forecasting a $2.03 billion for DOHMH. This is a decrease of 257.08 compared to the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. As you can, let me see. Okay, fantastic. So here, as you can see, one of the biggest flags or concerns that we have is that disease prevention and treatment is getting a $171.7 million cut, which coming out from the pandemic, which is resulting in all these economical problems, but also social and particularly in the health of our population throughout. It's something that it concerns us because our city should not be disinvesting in preparedness for any possible pandemic that might come up, or the waves that we experience. I know BP, you had something to say about this.
No, you're pretty straightforward, but yeah, I agree with all the recommendations that are going to be made here. But yeah, especially coming out of this pandemic, I don't know how we cut anything to do with health. Once again, we need to see enhancements. We've been working extremely hard on we've been working extremely hard with health and hospitals and others, and then also the emergency preparedness in response. We weren't prepared during the first wave of the pandemic, so we need to make sure we're fighting these cuts as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, especially our borough, who was the center of the pandemic. I know all of us remember those days, and we don't want to see it again. This takes me to a summary of a status of our hospitals. This has not changed a lot from our previous year. One of the most significant challenges our borough presents is the access to healthcare. We are already underbedded and we are underserved when it comes to hospital capacity. Queens currently has 9 acute care hospitals throughout the borough, responsible for serving over 2.4 million people or residents, but including people who travel from outside of the borough, right? We remain to be the most underbedded borough in New York City. There are only 1.60 beds per 1,000 patients in Queens, compared to the 5.53 beds in Manhattan and 2.58 in the Bronx. Out of these 3,851 beds, only 269 are for maternity beds. Clearly, we are not where we have to be, but we're working on that. For that, we have a lot of recommendations for DOHMH, which the first one is increase expense and capital funding to support for Queens H&H hospitals, funding for Article 28 freestanding healthcare facilities, funding for more prenatal and birthing centers, funding for food pantries, increase of COVID-19 and other respiratory illnesses resources. This is particularly important just because COVID is not the only respiratory illness that our population has been presenting. So that's why we want to encourage the administration and the OHMH to do more on this and invest more in it. And additionally, we want to continue we want to push or advocate for the continuation of city council initiatives for the OHMH.
Yeah, and let me just add on this. We have a lot of requests from our hospitals, and we've done well by them from our capital budget. But the needs to expand beds is something that most institutions are looking to do. So the capital funding is really going to be critical in expanding capacity because no one is building. Most states aren't building new hospitals, right? So it's a continued conversation. But until then, how do we expand capacity for the existing hospitals that are here? And this increase is going to be critical moving into the future, especially in light of more population growth. Also, maybe one thing and that capital funding can also go towards is the Gotham centers. And I am happy to say we've made significant progress in the Rockaways in opening a Gotham center. So I'm very happy about that and look forward to some announcements that we've been working with H&H on in the days to come. But we need to see more of these Gotham centers as well as we see development continuing to increase across the borough as well. So thank you, Iraq.
Thank you. And one thing to highlight, the Gotham Center was part of the priorities in the previous response. So we're getting the results. Fire Department of New York City, one of the most important agencies, given the unfortunate fires that our borough has experienced in the last year or so, or and beyond there. The preliminary budget for this agency is forecasting a $2.2 billion allocation. This is $50.8 million less than the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. This again represents a huge concern. So we always ask to increase funding for the FDNY personnel, expand the first response station in Roosevelt Island. This is a recommendation that we've been pushing for a while and will continue to do. Expand the number of EMTs and funding for generators. Something that we need to make sure is that we are able to provide electricity to in moments of emergency, and this is a situation that often does not happen. So these are the recommendations for FDNY, and I'm gonna move on a little to the next agency, which is the NYPD, the police department. This agency is a little larger, so it's gonna be two different slides. So I will give you a second to look into how this is being affected. So far, I'll highlight it a little bit. Community affairs is getting $3,000 cut. Criminal Justice Bureau is getting $22,000 cut. Housing Bureau is getting a $33,000 cut, and Internal Affairs is getting $28,000 cut. The rest of the programs present or not change or a small budget increase. And this is the last part of this presentation, which is it presents a lot of cuts. So the fiscal year 24 preliminary budget is forecasting a $5.44 billion. This is a decrease of $88.9 million to the NYPD. This, I'm gonna have a little breakdown here how it's being done. Our per capita funding, it represents is the second high. Queens. Let me rephrase that. Queens has the second highest population in New York City, and we receive the lowest amount of funding per capita. This is throughout agencies. We're noticing this, and it's always been the biggest issue. This is concerning just because Queens South and Queens North, I don't have the two together, but I'll give you a moment here. You can see that unfortunately between 2021 and 2022, there's been an increase on these, all these type of crimes, as well in Queens North. We all are aware Queens North and South continue their strong efforts to respond to crime, and despite the reduction in personnel, it's a huge issue because Queens is a huge piece of land, and sometimes it's harder for our officers to cover the whole area. Overall, crime incidents in Queens North and South have increased, and this is a concern. It comes from, that's why it concerns us that the Department of Youth is being youth services is being cut in certain key programs, because it gives us these results. So with that, our recommendations is provide additional neighborhood coordinator officers. And I know there's a lot of and a few of the priorities and testimonies from community boards, there were concerns about cars and how long it takes them to be repaired. So we want to see those police cars replaced, and given the funding for that. Now we're going to the Department of Sanitation. One of the biggest complaints that all community boards experience from our constituents, this fiscal year 24 budget forecast at, let me see one moment, sorry, my notes move here. Okay, there you go. Forecast at $1.8 billion. This is a decrease of $53.7 million compared to the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. The funding is being reduced in very important department functions. The general line for collection and street cleaning is projected at $266.93 million compared to the $300.71 million in the adopted fiscal year 23 budget. And a big concern, and I know this is a concern for everyone, is the waste prevention, reuse, and recycling budget function is being budgeted at $57.43 million. This is a $16.74 million shortfall. This, waste prevention, reuse, and recycling includes programs like composting, which has been a huge success and has helped us reduce the amount of waste that our residents produce. So for that, we I'm gonna give a little more background, and then we'll go into recommendations. Thankfully, the number of uniformed personnel and for enforcement remains the same as previous year. However, we want to see an increase, not a steady, right? And the percentage of acceptable streets saw a slight decrease of 4.5% from fiscal year 21 and 22. These numbers go a little later on. They go a couple years back, just because the reports take a little bit to come out. So that in the previous budget presentation, you saw fiscal year 20 versus 2021, and in fiscal year 2022, these were the results. Our recommendations are increase cleanup of major commercial corridors, increase the garbage and recycling pickup throughout the borough, restore and enhance funding for waste prevention, reuse, and recycling, and continue city council initiatives. These initiatives of the city council include like funding for the ACE program, supplementary collection services like ACE program, Wildcat, and all those programs that are very successful. Now, another big issue for our borough, housing. So the Housing Preservation and Development Agency is forecast at $1.19 billion compared to the previous year, which is a shortfall. It represents a shortfall of $61.63 million. As you can tell, these we already know that New York City is not producing enough housing compared to the need, and we believe that we should be looking at this more clearly. this is something I want to point out. Unfortunately, I was not able to find more updated information on the Housing New York plan. So as of right now, the only information I found is as of the December 31st of 2021. So as you can tell, we remain the second to least impacted with only 27,063 units compared to 68,857 in the Bronx or 52,762 in Brooklyn. These numbers should be looking better, but we're working very hard on this. I know, as you might be aware, our biggest priority is making sure that everyone has a dignified place to live in this borough, and we're making that a huge priority for us. This map, you're familiar with it. It's the same map of new construction and preservation that exists throughout. As we can tell, Queens has a little more space to cover. So our recommendations for this is create and preserve more affordable housing in Queens and expand community land trust in our borough. We know that these programs are critical for the creation of affordable housing that stays affordable. Continue housing support services in areas impacted by natural disasters like Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Ida, and other storms that were presented. I know, for example, Community Ward 2 has a huge concern with this constant flooding and the lack of infrastructure that we have here. Increase funding for supportive housing, which is critical to address the houseless situation of our homeless population. Allocate funding for eviction prevention programs so everyone can stay in their homes, and continue city council initiatives. Other big agency, Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation forecasts $1.4 billion. This is a 35.2 million. My presentation just moved here. Sorry. Okay, I see it now. So we have a 1.4 billion budget for the fiscal year 2024 preliminary budget, and this is a shortfall of $35.4 million. Traffic operation and maintenance is budgeted at $518.93 million. This is a 68.2 million shortfall from previous fiscal year. I know most of you don't stop hearing from transportation related complaints. So we are looking for the following recommendations: increase the number of slow zones, install more pedestrian and countdown clock signals throughout the borough, create more open space through open streets or other programs, increase capital funds to resurface streets, sidewalks, and create curb cuts, increase funding for traffic studies, repair and build new seawalls and bulkheads, invest capital funding to create and improve protected bike lanes, and continue city council initiatives. After this, sorry for that, we have the Queens Public Library. Our public libraries in Queens are forecasting a $117.76 million budget. This is a shortfall of $12.25 million from the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. This, as you can see, this represents the first 4 months of performance of the fiscal year 23, meaning last July. Queens has concerning numbers compared to the other libraries of Brooklyn and New York City. Our libraries open 6 days a week are at 75% compared to 100% on the other boroughs. And the libraries open 7 days a week. We only have 3% of them. Brooklyn has 11% and Manhattan has 8%. This is, this also like the attendance of each borough, as you can tell here. New York City has the largest one and we're the second largest one, but our libraries are still underperforming. So we want to increase expense funding to support and provide expanding 7-day service, increase capital funding to support Queens Borough public libraries. Also, we want to make sure that the Department of Design and Construction works effectively with our libraries. This is something that is being relied to us on the delays that we experience. And the VP here has been very strong on his position to see this change. So we'll continue to hold the administration accountable to have this process be more expedited, and so we can recover or increase the performance of our libraries in the borough. Now, with that, we're going to the Department of Cultural Affairs. Thankfully, there's no losses on personal services, so our cultural institution, our Cultural Affairs Department will be able to continue to provide the same levels of staff services. However, they're experiencing a cut of OTPS at $88.5 million. The overall allocation they're receiving this year is $149.8 million. As you can tell here, we have a total of 6, which is cultural institution groups. These are Queens Botanical Garden, New York Hall of Science, Queens Museum of Art, Queens Theater and Park, Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning, Museum of the Moving Image, PS1, and Flushing Town Hall. Unfortunately, all these agencies are experiencing a cut of budget. As you can tell, we have 3.4 million less for all these agencies in this upcoming fiscal year preliminary budget. Something important to highlight is that in the city of New York City, there's 35 cultural institution groups, which is known as 6. And overall, they're receiving a $63.42 million among the 35. So, we need to do better by our cultural institutions. They're a very important piece of our society. And as you can tell here, let me move my camera. Queens has an average funding per institution of $703, a little over $703,000 compared to other institutions in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan. There are over 2 million, and Staten Island, which is around 800,000. So, the per capita funding continues to be a problem throughout agencies. As I mentioned, we're operating at $2.34 per person in Queens on 8 cultural institutions. Our recommendations, as always, will be to increase funding for cultural organizations in Queens and continue city council initiatives. Now we move to the Department of Parks and Recreation. This is another that is going to be divided in a few slides, so I'll give you a moment to read these ones. Just want to make sure that you note that the administration in Queens is getting no cuts. And they will go here. The maintenance and operations in Queens are getting an increase. And as well recreation part of the program, we're not getting cuts. This is a good thing. There are budget cuts in the agency. However, the Queens operations do not get those. So the fiscal year 24 preliminary budget is forecasting a $587.6 million allocation, which is a decrease of $41.52 million compared to the fiscal year 23 budget. However, again, the Queens budget functions do not have any of these cuts. This has been a constant advocacy from our office, but as well of our partners and our local representatives. So, and of course, the community boards that are holding these agencies to the fire. VP, anything you want to mention in this?
Yeah, only thing I wanted to flag was forestry, because I know all of us have those, get the trees and sidewalk complaints, and when are they pruning? So that is something that we want to focus on and see enhancements and not cuts too as well.
Yep, and that takes,
Otherwise, all good.
yeah, no, definitely. And that, in a moment, it'll tell me to the recommendations, but I want to highlight these. Queens has the highest parkland, of acres than any borough. We have 7,748 acres. This is an increase from last year. About 100 acres were increased. In the acres, we have 464 parks, playgrounds, triangles, and malls throughout the borough in the 14 community boards. The current number of maintenance and operation personnel during peak and off-peak season continue to be insufficient. We're happy that we don't get cuts, but we continue to be underserved just because of the amount of space. And this is reflected again on what the VP just said, that pruning complaints, maintenance of the streets, of the trees and streets, it's always an issue. So we continue to do with these recommendations, which is increase the number of personnel in Queens, increase the funding for tree pruning, increase the funding for more trees, increase funding for sidewalk repairs, increase capital funding to support the Queens parks, increase capital funding for the creation, preservation, and adaptation of open space and new parks, provide capital funds to create bioswales and other solutions to address flooding problems throughout Queens, and importantly, continue city council initiatives. I want to see the time, so so I'm gonna go a little faster because it's almost 6:30, and I don't want to. I want to hear from you, which is the most important part of this. So the Department of Small Businesses is projecting a 164.27 million budget. This is a shortfall of 139.07 million compared to fiscal year 23. Business development is funded at 3.4 million less than the previous fiscal year, and the workforce development is funded 1954 million less than the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. For that, recommendations we have: expand resources for small businesses impacted by COVID-19, restore funding for agency administration and operations, restore funding for business, workforce, and neighborhood development, and continue council initiatives. Now we go to the Department of Buildings. The Department of Buildings forecasts 121.17 million budget. This is a shortfall of 117 million compared to fiscal year 23 adopted budget. Why is this concerning? Well, as you can tell by this chart that I obtained through open data, and this is for as of December 31st on 2022, out of the 15,796 complaints in Queens, 9,989 continue to be active as of January 30th. Clearly, we're not, addressing these complaints fast enough. For that, we want to increase the number of building inspectors for Queens and funding to help small to medium-sized houses of worship and nonprofit organizations. Now we go to another important agency, which is CUNY. CUNY is is projected to have a 1.27 billion budget, which is a 168.04 million decrease from the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. This forecast includes funding for the community college as well, 122.32 million for LaGuardia Community College, and 112.42 for Queens Borough Community College. Our recommendations for these agencies is increase capital budget for CUNY and Queens campuses, fully restore and enhance funding for CUNY, and continue city council initiatives. BP, we heard about them in our hearings, and we'll continue to actively work with them to address these needs. So I believe there's two more agencies, so I'll just go very fast to it. Fiscal year 24 for the Department of Environmental Protection. is forecasting a 1.54 billion budget. This is a decrease of 80 million from the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. This is mostly attributed to 23.3 million cut to miscellaneous funding and 32.17 million to upstate water supply funding. So our recommendations continue to be increase the amount of workers to clean catch basins, increase capital funds for sewer improvements, invest in more solar programs and green infrastructure, address groundwater contamination issues, invest in noise pollution mitigation efforts, and continue city council initiatives. Now we're going to the Department of Homeless Services. The fiscal year 24 preliminary budget forecasts a 2.33 billion budget for the department for this department. This is a decrease of $69.2 million. You know, the concern here is family shelter operations is funded at 40.04 less than the fiscal year 23 adopted budget, and adult shelter operations is funded 10.81 million less than the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. I know this is a huge concern for all the community boards as we continue to, you know, hear from our constituents and see the results of the lack of housing opportunities for these communities. So our recommendations are increase the amount of workers to, oh, sorry, this is not it. Sorry for that. So give me 1 second and I'll get you the recommendations for our homeless services. So we have the restore of funding for outreach, drop-in and reception services, restore funding for family shelter operations, resources for gender expansive people in the shelter system, and the continuation of city council oversight and initiatives. I'm going to make sure to update this slide before I send them to all of you, so apologies for that. And with that, I know it was a lot of information, so I'm looking forward to hear from all your recommendations and next steps. And I'll be taking note with my staff here from the budget department. So PP, thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Now we'll open the floor up. I will go to Ashley, I see first, and then Chair Orr and Chair Ashley. Ashley first.
Yes, thank you, Borough President. I have a question. Where was HRA?
Oh, sorry for that. HRA, I did not include on this presentation, just to save those time, but I can definitely send you all the information on HRA and update this.
We had to condense it a little bit because it's a lot of material.
Okay, thank you.
We have recommendations for HRA?
Yeah, so HRA is getting again, budget cuts, so we're recommending that, you know, the increase in haste of staff funding for them to not have those delays.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Chair Orr.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for the presentation. You put a lot of work into it. I appreciate it. I just want to give a shout out to the 101st precinct. When you look at the stats, they are the only precinct in Queens that actually had a reduction in crime. So we're very proud of that. So a couple of other quick questions. It's disappointing. It has nothing to do with Borough Hall. It's disappointing that we only have the affordable housing unit data from 2021. It really does not give anyone the opportunity to really study where the need is and where we are in the process if we're 2 years behind. I would, though, like with what we have, and when we get updated for 22, that it's shared with us, but I would appreciate a breakdown of the 10,919 units by community board. If there's any way we could get that information, that would be important to us. On the seats, school seats, District 27, we're short 822 seats. I don't know exactly in what particular neighborhoods of the district, but I'm concerned about Rockaway with development that's in the pipeline, that the schools are not coming with it. Now, certainly Some of the folks with children will be moving from one area of the peninsula to the other to newer developments, opening seats in other districts. But wherever they've moved from, other folks will be moving into those seats. So if we're building, 5,000-10,000 units of housing and we're not adding seats and we're already down in the district by 822, we're going to have a school crisis here on the peninsula. So I think that needs to be looked at very, very closely. And I guess that's all. I just want to comment on one of Community Board 14's priorities, and the Department of Transportation wants us to withdraw the request. Shorefront Parkway, which has about 4,500 units of housing. We are in flood zone 1. And we do not have any storm sewers on the road we live on. Okay, we're right on the beach. We have no storm sewers, and they've indicated that it does not warrant storm sewers in a flood zone 1. So I would love someone explaining to us why we don't need storm sewers in a flood zone 1. Thank you.
Yeah, that's more DEP. So we would look in, and I don't think you have conditions. That's what they're saying, right? Warranted there right now. But I agree with you. I mean, we should have infrastructure everywhere. So
There's no street in the city of New York that shouldn't have a storm sewer.
I am in 1,000% alignment with you. Trust me.
Thank you.
We are 40, 50 years behind where we need to be technically in the borough. And then I just wanted to also comment, because I tout this all the time, the 101 seeing the steepest drop, one of 2 precincts, and it's something we need to talk about more. And the reason that is because of good policing, like a real outreach effort on behalf of the precinct.
Yeah.
Then you add on, some of those job opportunities that come through some of the development. Then you add on the community-based organizations who do great work. So everybody, doing their darndest to really pour into the community is really what makes communities safer. And not only to speak, also just speaking of a lot of the things we went through today, those investments going into youth services, those are investments going into workforce development. So it's a model in how we can move the borough forward. And 101 is definitely a model on that. And I'll end up just saying on the school seat piece, we are meeting with School Construction Authority and continuing to make sure we keep Rockaway, and it's not just Rockaway. We have a crisis in many spots around the borough, but I just want you to know Rockaway is centered in all of those conversations. We are still having conversations around Auburn East as well, and the possibility of a school going there as well. So I just want to make sure you knew that we're going to continue to push on all of these fronts. But it is a borough-wide issue because, as Iraq put it earlier, while a lot of the boroughs are seeing a decrease in population, Queens is seeing an increase all over. So people want to be here, and with that comes the need for more school seats.
Yes, and I would say the 20 years, and Betty's been a chair longer than I have, Queens, the per capita investment in the residents of the borough has always been less than any other borough. And
Amen.
it's disgraceful.
Yep.
Time for that to change.
Yep. We're still working with the mayor on that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dolores. All right. We'll go to Chair Kelty and then Chair Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. BP. Just a view this had last year's budget next to us. And at the time we had put in Reopen Engine Company 261 in Western Queens and create a Rockaway Peninsula Ladder Company. And I didn't see it in this year. So I don't know if it was overstated or lost somewhere in the picture, but that's been in our budget for a while, only because of what we've been seeing over the course of the years. And I think this justification for the Rockaways is what happened to them during the storms and stuff. So I just bring that to your attention on.
Well, I think we do have, did we pull out Iraq? So I know for your individual community board needs, we took, I don't know, do we have a
Yeah, I have it. I can show
Yeah.
it here.
Yeah. So, I mean, you don't have to do it today, but we do have your individualized list.
No,
And
no,
that's submitted
it's-
along with.
Those are not mine, though. 261 is
Okay.
is in Maspeth area,
Right.
and they were closed years ago. And
Yep.
Rockaway is Ward 14. So these were citywide. Because I worked in the department, Mr. BP, that's the only reason why those flagged for me right away. But I want to make sure we're protected with the thing. The second thing I have is the building department, and great job, Iraq, on the numbers, but I was really worried about that they lost almost half of the amount of money, 117, 599. And I'm a little concerned since we have the council people on. The mayor wants to push some of the stuff from the fire department into the building department. He wants to do some of their inspections. And if we diminish the numbers in the building department, that would be the last agency I'd want to give any help to right now. Leave it alone with the fire department. The civilian component of the fire department has been excellent. They just needed supported to get more of them in there because the people willing to pay for the services. And we had commissioners that didn't force the issue to get more people in there. So hopefully with a new commission, we could see. And the last thing I just want to mention is, I heard what you say, Dolores, and very nice for the precinct over there, but I've got the worst precinct right now with the 101st being the top of the list. Great guys, great leadership, but I'm stuck with getting the worst number. So I'd like to see a precinct in our district since we've been asking, and I know, Mr. BP, you finally got yours after, 40 years? It was.
Yes.
So I do understand there's a long time on it, but we'd like to just make sure we're in that loop so we can get it in there eventually one of these days.
Yep. And we are working extremely hard, and the 109 was hit extremely hard
Yep.
last year.
Yep.
So we are anticipating some additional resources being pumped into your precinct.
Thank
in
you.
terms of manpower. So we've been working extremely hard and close with NYPD on
It
that.
is. We're a super district, Mr. BP. We're a super district where others have a little smaller, and they took a real beating trying to get around the whole borough. So yes, I'd love to see the help that they could get because they deserve it. They're great. They do a great job. It's just they're understaffed on it. Thank you.
And Gene, one thing, I took note of what you mentioned, the first two items, and we'll make sure to add them at the top as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to go to Frank Chair Taylor.
Okay. Hello, Mr. BP. How are you, Donovan?
Great. I'm great.
It's great to see you. Great to see all the rest of the chairs on here also. I'm going to keep this short, but this budget is devastating to the community of which I serve, Community Board 3, North Corona, East Elmhurst, and Jackson Heights. As everyone knows, we're a shelter town, and you're going to cut, not you, but the city wants to cut money to the shelters when we don't have resources for these shelters to begin with. And they're all seem to be put over here, 12 or 13 shelters. The housing, as we got a building going up every other week here, but you still have 5 and 10 people living in a 1-bedroom apartment, sleeping in bathtubs. I mean, this is 2023. No one says anything about this. The schools are failing over here, as I've been to board meetings and I've told them straight to his face, this is horrible. Look at the statistics of the kids that are failing. Look at the statistics, and these are our kids that we're failing. MTA just took out 22 bus stops on Northern Boulevard in our area because they said the bus was going too slow. My thing to them is the bus for mass transit, like pick up people and move people, or is it for speed? You know, what are we doing? I didn't see any statistics for the 115 precinct. We have a great precinct. The precinct head is fantastic. He's full of outreach and he really responds to areas. So we should be really low. But I mean, what's going on? We had 7 or 8 people died during the storm over here with the floods, and we're not being looked at by anybody to do anything. I mean, we talk about hospitals. Queens has closed 10 or 12 hospitals in the last 15 years. They've opened up 0. I mean, Elmhurst is great. And I'm not saying anything about those doctors. I think they do a heck of a job. But there's only so many people you can take care of. There's 1 bed for every 25,000 people persons that's here. That's not fair. This whole thing, and like I said, my fellow chairs, You've been chairs 10, 15, 20 years, some of you guys. This is my second year. This is not fair. This is deplorable on what we're getting here. We pay some of the highest taxes in the city per capita, and we're not getting anything over here, except more shelters, less transportation, less supermarkets. I mean, what are we doing? I mean, I'm beating my head up against the wall, Donovan, man. I mean, I'm getting complaints every day. Giovanna's getting complaints every day. And I'm like, I can't explain it. I mean, Queens, I see we don't get enough as it is, but we're the stepchild here. That's my thing. This is devastating for us. This budget
is devastating for everyone. You know, and certainly, you know, there are certain districts that historically have been disinvested. And I don't want to say you're getting nothing, because that's not true. There's a lot of good work happening, but we're so many decades behind in investments. But you know, we are making some headway, you know, with Elmhurst Hospital and others, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure we correct these inequities, which is why was our borough the most impacted during COVID, right? There's a direct correlation between the lack of investments and what we saw on the street from a public safety standpoint, from a public health standpoint. So this is why we are doing this budget response. We'll continue to make some headway with this administration, who has put more money in, but we need to still correct a lot of the historic disinvestments. We shouldn't have to every year have a budget response where we're pointing these inequities out. They should be fixed. And that's a call for us to continue. And, you know, I will see the mayor in a few weeks to continue to make that case.
Well,
But
I'm glad that you're here doing it.
sure.
I'm glad that you're the man here doing it. You are built for this, Donovan. I've known you for many years. You're built for this, and I'm glad that you're here doing it.
Yeah. So we got work to do. You know, we still have a lot of work to do, and I won't be happy until we fix a lot of these inequities before we get out of here. So this is why we're having a strong budget response, because absolutely everything you pointed out impacts your community, and it does hit certain communities of color harder than other communities. And we just have to be clear about those disparities that have we've historically encountered. So heard you loud and clear. A lot of work that continues to need to be done in your district, and we're going to continue to make headway there. And we look forward to correcting once again these inequities and making the case to the mayor once again on why these inequities have to be fixed, especially in light of, like I said, the growth coming in, the concentration now of asylum seekers, which Queens is now seeing the largest majority. And while we open our arms, we love everybody. We are an immigrant borough, the world's borough. We will always open our arms, but with that comes the challenges around school seats and the need for more services as well. So we're with you. Let's continue to all work together to fix these inequities. I see Heather now.
Good evening, Borough President. First, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for getting us this report ahead of time. I know that was probably due to a lot of hard work by Iraq and his team. So thank you. It was really helpful to kind of prepare for this. So deeply appreciate it. Also, thank you for making fighting for services for aging one of your top priorities. What we see in this community are a lot of families asking for affordable housing so they can stay and take care of their aging parents because they can't afford to live in the community they're in. And until that can happen, those services that double as wellness checks are just so vital to this community because our seniors are freaking amazing, but we need to support them so they can remain amazing. So thank you for that. The one point I have with education is in regards to what we know is coming down the pike with the class size mandate. You know, we talk about extending seats because we're not even where we need to be right now. We all know this. Forest Hills High School, freaking 180-something%. I know you know this. So as we're trying to get these places to where they need to be, our benchmark is going to move. Our benchmark is going to get is going to demand even more seats. So I think as we talk in this report, and I'm thinking borough-wide, I'm not just talking about my district, is that maybe we mention that in our report to say that we're not just looking at these seats for rectifying the problems we have now, but a look to the future so that we can provide better people to teacher ratios so that our students can be stronger and our future in Queens can be stronger. So that's just one point I have. A question I have regarding Queens Public Libraries. Appreciate your oversight and concern with DDC, as we have a library that we've been waiting on since I moved to New York City in 1994 and have married, had babies, and we still have the same library. So I would really hope that we're able to really keep that on the ground and keep that moving, and that's not going to go away for us, because it's been sort of clawed back and given to us and clawed back again. And as cute as that is in a Hungry Hippos game, if you're young kids, it's not fun in a community when you have a library that really serves a community that desperately needs it and is over capacity. So that's my note on the libraries. One question I'm a little concerned about is, and this is going to sound strange, is with the cuts with the NYPD and school safety. I'm just a little concerned about that, because I feel like that is a program that actually is preventative, as opposed to some of the NYPD that is sort of, you know, it's basically a program that's more on the offensive as opposed to a program that's on the defensive. And I'm always pro programs that try to get ahead of a problem before it gets bigger. So I am a little concerned about that for our schools in general across the borough. And lastly, I want to second what Dolores said. I would like to better understand our affordable housing numbers by community districts. I know that there's been a new mandate come down from the governor where she's looking at community districts to carry their fair share. And it would be great to have a gauge as to where we are today and where we need to be tomorrow, so that as we get these applications, we're actually working towards something and we know what we're working towards. So thank you guys so much. This has been extremely helpful tonight.
Thank you. And let me hit on a few of your points. So one, Forest Hills High School, you'll be happy to know that we have made some progress, close but no cigar yet, but we have made some progress with SCA, in which I want to really give kudos to my engineer, our lead engineer at Borough Hall, Mohammed, who's really done an extremely good job at breaking through minutia that the city of New York should be able to break through. But we did their homework for them, and I'll just leave it at that. So God willing, knock on wood, we'll make some progress there. On the affordable housing, once again, we know we requested a lot of this data from the city agencies. Some come back, some don't. So we'll continue to await that. But I will say that many districts in Queens are lagging behind, based on just some brief analysis I've seen from the state on where we need to see some growth. CB 14 is doing pretty well. I would say it's probably the only place. And of course, I'm the former council member there. I was never shy about talking about affordable housing and more housing. But a lot of the other parts of Queens are lagging behind. And, you know, we are working very closely with the Department of City Planning. And then obviously with the mandate coming down from the state, you know, we're interested in seeing how that's going to impact and what teeth will be put in place to ensure that we see more growth, more support in Queens. But most importantly, this is why we pointed out in the HPD budget, you know, we need to see that funding because we need to be able to finance these units. We don't want just luxury market, and it's nothing, listen, I'm for mixed income housing, but we can't have, you know, majority luxury developments and then like a smaller percentage of affordable in it, based on what we're seeing around the borough and what we're hearing on the ground from many of you. So still a lot of work to be done there. And then Iraq, I don't know if you have a bullet point on school safety, but you can work with Heather on that. And we are, there are some schools that don't have any school safety agents, and we made a push to make sure, and I will always say they're not the sole answer to security, because guess what? You know, my experience at Jamaica High School, you know, there's a lot going on outside those doors. So we want to make sure that we have a holistic approach as we even look at school safety as well. But we can definitely add that a bullet point there to ensure that we have coverage in schools, period. We don't, some schools, like I said, have zero in the borough. So we do want to see some preventative measures put in place there. I think I answered all your questions.
Yeah, and I took note, BP.
Oh, and then on libraries, so y'all are all gonna get called to a meeting because I am not happy with the state of funding in libraries and how slow it is to move a lot of these projects. So we are in the process of setting up a meeting with DDC, Queens Library, and I've made it very clear to Queens Library that every year you come to us for capital, we need to see some progress. And I know many city council members we partner with on these projects aren't happy as well. So many community boards as well are unhappy. So, you know, this is an issue we are really going to make some progress on, God willing, this year. But we are calling everybody to the mat because I'm tired of putting capital in and not seeing these libraries move. Look out for that meeting, which is coming up soon.
Community Board 6 thanks you.
Yes. Going to put some, we're going to hold their feet to the fire. We got to see progress in the libraries. All righty, we'll go to Walter and then Danielle.
I appreciate your work on, you have to advocate for Queens, you have to take the budget cuts on the chin. Thanks, this is great work. Two quick things. One, I think Iraq on page 6, I think there's a little bit of a mistake. I'm surprised nobody else brought it up, but under community boards, under personnel services, you have it at, we're losing $8 million, it looks like, or $8,000.
It's thousands.
335. It's going 3345. It's going up to 3353, which is an increase in $8,000, not a decrease. I think that's where your numbers are a little off. So check that out.
Oh, thank you.
Secondly, is the culturals, Borough President, are losing really a significant amount of what the borough gives them to their budget. When are they going to know? When are they going to find out and learn?
Well, we're in preliminary now, so all of the numbers you see now that are projected cuts, you know, there will be a lot of push and pull and advocacy, you know, between now and the executive budget. So, you know, none of these are set in stone, but they are alarming, and we sound the alarm and go in and fight.
Terrific, thanks.
Thanks for the catch. Danielle?
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It was very illuminating. So I echo many of the things that have been said, but I'm going to focus on beds, maternity beds, and places to give birth. This is as you know, a long-standing issue in Western Queens where I am. Yes, those of us who are insured can go across the river and give birth, but that's not always ideal and not always possible, especially during a pandemic. But those who are not insured, that's not so easy to do. So this is just such a need, like places to give birth. And I think my suspicion is it's a need throughout the borough based on that few number of beds. So I just really want to emphasize that. Thank you.
Thank you. And you should know that we're making progress working with the council. For instance, we've made a lot of headway with hospitals who put in this request to update. So Elmhurst Hospital being one. St. John's, we fully funded one for St. John's, a new maternity ward in the Rockaways. However, that it's moving too slow for my taste. I'm hearing that it's finally moving. So this is an area we want to focus in on because it's a glaring inequity, you know, being born into the world in a place that, you know,
I know. Yeah,
doesn't have the investment. It's shameful. So so we're looking to fix those and working very closely with H&H. And I do want to thank our council partners because many of the requests, like I said, we've gotten for maternity wards are pretty much fully funded. So
thank you.
Great, thank you. Reverend Thorbs.
Yes, thank you, BP, for this meeting. This was enlightening and also heartbreaking almost. You already know Community Board 12 with our shelters and with our seniors and the loss of a hospital. And within this budget, the way it's being cut, I don't see any signs of relief. It's almost like making the brick without the straw at this point. We thought we were doing it before, now we're really doing it. And I'm just praying that something shifts. As far as Staten Island receiving more per capita, somebody's got to fix it. Somebody's got to fix it. It doesn't make any sense. It has to be fixed, and it has to be fixed now, because if this mayor doesn't fix it, it'll never get done. It'll never get done. So whatever it takes, he just needs to buckle up and make it happen, get it done, because our boroughs and our community boards are being shifted like wheat here. And the same with our schools. We're going to need even more seats. We're taking in a lot of the asylum seekers. Now, we don't know where they are because nobody wants to tell us, because they tell us it's a security situation, but we're supposed to be ready for them in schools. So that also needs to be worked out. Either you're going to trust us to assist and help, or stop asking us to help. Because we can't even get a list as to where they are unless something tragic happens or something takes place, and then it pops up on the news, and then we know where they are or where they could be. I don't know how much more, what else we can do on our end, but we do, with all the things that are being taken from us in regards to the youth and the seniors, we have to cover our seniors and we have to cover our kids. That's just the whole thing. We have to cover them. We cannot leave them to be picked apart the way this budget is really doing them. So thank you. Thank you for your team that did this work.
Thank you. And this data, it's sobering, but it also it gives us a weapon to go in there and fight for the borough with, right? So I really do want to thank Iraq for the work that he's done to put this together, and his team, Fanny and everyone in the fiscal team, because this is what enables us now, especially coming out of the pandemic, right? We've talked about not simply going back to normal, but building a new normal. So I don't want anybody to think that this is like we're going to fight like hell for our borough. And, we don't just settle for city. We're working with the governor, we're working with our federal partners, because the inequities are glaring. So a lot more work to be continued. Like I said, I'm confident we're making headway in some spaces, but still a long way to go when you look at those numbers.
And I think Dolores said it best, even with the governor's plan with the housing, where does she plan for all this housing to go? Because when the Long Island Railroad, as it runs through St. Albans, those are residential homes. What kind of plan is that to invade on residential homeowners?
We got to build housing, so I won't be shy in saying that. But
not on top of the community.
But we will see what the proposal shapes out to be. Right now, it's nothing definitive, but every community board is going to have to grow by mandatory 3%, and that's going to be state law, right? So
does that include downtown Jamaica?
Well, downtown Jamaica is already growing, but
that's what I'm saying.
To be continued. To be continued.
Well, downtown Jamaica, don't forget, also needs its own sanitation. They need a garage for them, because I think garage 10 can't handle much more.
Yep, we got a lot more work that has to be done, especially with the growth in downtown Jamaica.
Thank you.
TBD. To be continued on that. All righty, Betty.
I was just thanking Reverend Dorff that Board 10's housing more sanitation garages in his borough than anybody else. We're running out of space, but I commend the work that Iraq has done on this. It's this work that the budget people at Borough Hall do every year that gives us the ammunition that we need to fight with. And it's definitely an excellent job, and I commend everybody that worked on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Miss Betty.
All right, any other comments, questions, or concerns on the presentation? Chair Block, you can remove the 116 this year.
Well, that's what I said. So I moved by. Tell Gene that we could just send some folks over there and advocate for the next 40 years to help him out. Because we'd advocating that when you were back in grammar school, right, or high school, right? So, but on a serious note, thank you for the presentation, you and Iraq and everyone on the team. That's all I have to say. Seriously, thank you.
Thank you. All right. passing it back over to Iraq. I think I'm finished saying everything I need to. But you know, we're going in.
Yeah, so just for next steps, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take all the feedback and add the recommendations that we discussed, as well as making the edits for both the presentation and the draft that I sent, so we can have a unified message in both. I'm gonna share the presentation with you all because I know having a summarized, more easy access is helpful. I'm sorry, VP, we have Betty.
Yes, yeah, please.
Are we voting tonight?
Excuse me?
Are we voting today?
Yes, so after this, Marcella will be taking the vote. Maricela, sorry, I don't know why I said Marcella, sorry. I'm just exhausted mentally right now. Maricela will take the vote.
I don't know what he went through to get through this. Congratulations, you deserve like a day off or something.
Thank you, and I'll make sure to send everyone this draft and finalize everything, and we'll be able to present very, very much in time as our charter mandated responsibility, the response to the preliminary budget. So I appreciate everyone's input on the hearing. I know it was an intense new format. And I want to thank you all for coming a second Borough Board meeting this month, because I know also your time is invaluable. So I really, really appreciate it. So that was all.
Michael's going to give you Saturday off.
I'll think about it. You know?
All right, Maricela.
Yes. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to start with the chairpersons. So count.
You need a motion, right? Somebody.
But sorry, a motion to, I guess, start voting. Betty, help me out.
To approve, I'll make a motion that we approve the preliminary budget response as presented by Iraq.
I'll second it.
You got a second. Okay, good. You beat me to it. Go ahead.
Okay, so Chairperson Torniali,
Yes.
Chairperson Brucker,
Yes.
Chairperson Taylor,
Yes.
First Vice Chair Reed,
Yes.
First Vice Chair Sanchez,
Yes.
Heather, I can't pronounce your last name, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Chairperson Kelty,
Yes.
Chairperson Taylor, Chairperson Martha Taylor. I think you're muted, Martha. All right, I'll circle back. Martha, you have to unmute your iPhone. Chairperson Algarito. I think she is.
Yes. Yes.
Algarito?
Yes.
Okay. Chairperson Broughton.
Yes.
Chairperson, Vice Chair Dadras. Victor Zadras. Community Board 11. I see you on. We'll circle back. Chairperson Thorpes. Chairperson
Yes.
Thorpes. Okay.
Yes.
Chairperson Block.
Yes.
Chairperson Orr.
Yes.
Okay, circling back. Chairperson Taylor. Martha Taylor.
Or her moving before.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Maybe type. Can she type her vote in? If she hears it.
Can you?
Type
Let's
it
see.
in the chat. I don't know if that's.
Okay, so I'm gonna run through the council members if they are here as well. Council member Palladino.
It's Ally, her chief of staff. Good evening. I don't
Good
know if I
evening.
could vote on her behalf, but yes.
Okay. Council member Ong. Okay, no, not present. Council member Moya. Not present. Council member Caban. Council member Lee. Council member Gennaro. Council member Krishnan. Council member Wong. I feel like I did see Council member Wong. Okay. Council member Williams. Council member Natasha Williams.
Yes,
Right.
Anne Marie Barnett here for Council Member Natasha Williams.
Okay.
I vote yes.
Are those votes, no, right?
No, I believe, no, so often council members just,
Full delegation, normally the council delegation abstains.
yeah, they abstain just because they're gonna vote in the
They gotta
budget.
negotiate too.
Yeah.
Got
Yes,
it.
it's my
Okay.
understanding. I wouldn't vote. It's just speaker's right.
Got it. Okay, so should I keep running through the names or?
I mean, you can, yeah, you have
Okay,
to.
so Councilmember Schulman,
Hi, this is Kevin on behalf of Councilmember Shulman. I think we vote to abstain, I think was what was discussed.
Yeah. We just have to do the formality, so.
got it. Councilmember Holden. Councilmember Brooks Powers. Councilmember Ariola. Councilmember Gutierrez. And I'm just gonna circle back, Chairperson Taylor.
Frank Taylor.
No, not Taylor, Martha Taylor.
Oh, Martha Taylor. Oh, he voted.
Yeah, sorry
I'm
about
here,
that.
so- I'm here.
No, not you, Frank. It was Martha Taylor.
Okay.
And then Chairperson, Vice Chair Victor Dadros, Community Board 11,
Yes,
voting yes in the affirmative for the budget.
yes,
Okay, so that's 1,
Thank
2,
you.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 in the affirmative. Oh, sorry, 13 in the affirmative. I guess yes, 14 in the affirmative with Councilmember Palladino, and then 1 abstain. So 14 in the affirmative and 1 abstain. Is that correct?
Oh, yell it loud through the phone. Maricela?
Yes.
Maricela is on my phone. Can't unmute herself. She's gonna tell you her vote right now. Yell, Martha.
Never goes.
There's a yes.
Okay. So 14 in the affirmative, 1 abstain.
Yeah, you don't count the members, the council members.
So
Okay, then
Councilmember
just
Palladino
Just the
abstains.
board. Just the
Okay,
board.
then just 14 in the affirmative.
Yep.
We're all good? Right?
Yeah. All righty. You did a good job, Iraq. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Next time I'll do much better, so.
It's your
I'll
first,
be accountable to that.
it's your first one. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming out. And like I said, I look forward to the fight, working with our city council delegation as well, to combat many of these cuts that will have a negative impact on our borough. And I want to thank you all for your partnership, and let's continue to work collectively together to make sure we hold these agencies accountable, so the work continues. So thank you all, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. VP.
Thank you.